Okay, I've teased this for like 5 months now. Wait, it's been 5 months? Jesus. Well, it's finally time for the long teased Code Geass video. I watched the show right before Christmas time last year, which probably wasn't a great time in hindsight because, you know, it's not a very jolly show to say the least. But I watched it because my best friend really wanted me to, and I'm just such a great friend, of course. It was on my list for a while though, but after she suggested it, I decided to watch it. And I came into it with very high expectations. Like, I heard this show was literally the greatest thing ever made, and Lelouch was a gift from the heavens themselves. And well, I wasn't disappointed, let's say. It was a wild ride. Absolutely chaotic with so many twists and turns that I had no idea where anything was going. Granted, I was spoiled at the ending, but still, everything was such a wild ride. I describe it as a mix of Attack on Titan and Evangelion. That's what it reminded me in terms of personal feeling. And I love the experience. It's an amazing story. But was it really as good as everyone said? Was this story really sent straight from the heavens themselves that makes everything else pale in comparison? Does it really make Attack on Titan look like a cheap knockoff? No, not really. For my personal rankings, Code Geass is 7th, and it honestly frustrates me when I think back to this story, because this story should have been what everyone said it was. It should have been this perfect, amazing story, but to me it's not, and it's nowhere close to that. And don't get me wrong, it's an amazing peak show that does so many things better than everything else, but it could have been so much better if that makes sense, and it could have been so much better pretty easily in my opinion. Some decisions made just held the story back, and it's so frustrating. It's not an up and down roller coaster exactly, it's one that slows and speeds up at all times, and it just leaves you knowing the ride could have been better. This video isn't going to be organized and structured as the usual on this channel. It'll be more like the DC video, but maybe a little organized than that. I don't know, we'll find out, but it's going to be more ranty. But I want to start off with the parts of the show that are without a doubt amazing and peak, as its reputation says it is. Let's start off with some really basic things. The mechas. Code Geass's nightmares are actually awesome. They are so cool. A combat with them is really cool to watch, and I really like how the important characters have their own unique ones. Suzaku's Lancelot is really cool and was an amazing threat early on in the show. Holland's Gurren was a really cool response to Lancelot, and I love the red on it. Lelouch and CT's Emperor one with the cannon was really cool. All the other important fighters get one, and they're all cool. The mech aspects were really cool, and if you like cool robots, you'll like them. Colors is the best anime opening of all time, and I won't hear any arguments on that. And of course the plot. Oh boy was it good. They weren't afraid to do anything, and it was absolutely crazy in every episode, and you could really never guess what's happening next. But I'll talk about the handling of the plot more in depth, both the good and bad, when we get to the main section of the video. The characters were mostly good. The important three of Lelouch, C2, and Suzaku were all amazing and peak. Lelouch was worth all the glaze that he gets. He perfectly matched his show and was a perfect protagonist for this show. His motives remain consistent throughout the show, and you can't help but root for him. He doesn't necessarily grow throughout the show that much, but he doesn't need to. He perfectly embodied the human mask and what it takes to create change, which is why Suzaku is also such a great character in this show, because of how he conflicts with Lelouch. He's so good at that, in fact. People don't like him because people just love to glaze Lelouch. He's supposed to be the opposite of Lelouch, someone that has a harmful sense of naiveness, of blind and misguided hope. He's a psychologically broken man because of his past of having to kill his father and of course the events of this show. And while Lelouch has almost a harmful sense of action, of a mindset of by whatever means necessary. The conflict of these two close friends on opposite sides is so interesting to watch and was some of the best parts of the show. The conflict between trying to create change through the system or trying to create change by destroying it. And at both their cores, they are both broken kids robbed of what they want. They are both tragic characters. They never got to live that life they wanted and had so many things they had to do that they didn't want to do. And I want to emphasize that for Lelouch. At the end of the day, all he wanted was for his sister to live in a world worth living in, for all her hardships to be worth it. He didn't want so many to die for it, but it just had to be that way. The Lelouch and Suzaku moments were among the show's best. Also among the show's best was any moment C2 was in. C2 was a perfect character for the show. First, she blended the more mystical aspects of Geass into the more futuristic mecha vibe of the show perfectly, and second, she's just goated, man. She was the perfect companion for Lelouch as really the only one that could keep up with him in his insane pursuits. She was the only one who could effectively keep him company and comfort him because of that, and vice versa. Her backstory with the desire to be loved and how she lost herself throughout her long and grueling life is very interesting. And to have Lelouch be the one she was looking for so so long was done well, as their chemistry and dynamic was just really good. I've only really mentioned Suzaku and C2's interaction with Lelouch, but of course they go beyond that. They have their own motivations and are their own characters. But I can't say that for all the characters, unfortunately. Let's start with our first bump of the roller coaster, the side characters. And what's frustrating for me that these characters should have been really good, but really the only really good side characters I could think of were Rolo and Yuffie. Rolo was a huge surprise for me because I, like, everyone else, thought he was an annoying little shit at first. But they executed his arc really well as a victim of brainwashing and a lack of love. And importantly, they kept on emphasis on that for the entire time with this character. Same with Suzaku and his beliefs and C2's motivations. They consistently kept that idea as the central thing and didn't give it up. So even though we hated him for killing Shirley, knowing his story, we still felt bad for him, and his death was ultimately a sad scene. This was all achieved because of his well-established motivations and character. Same with Yuffie. She was really the first Britannian that we saw that genuinely cared for the well-being of the Japanese. Of course, she was pretty naive, but her heart was in the right place, and there never was a catch to it. And that was the important part. There never was a catch, and that was consistently shown to be her main motivation, and she actually did things based on that. That's why her death, that whole sequence, was so devastating, because she didn't deserve it and it was a horrific tragedy. She genuinely wanted to help, and this is what happened. Would her plan have ended up working is anyone's guess, but how it played out was really the turning point of the show that told us that this show was not scared to do anything, and was successful because of Yuffie's character being built up adequately for it. But side note, the way this played out was a little ridiculous. Really, Lelouch? Of all the things it could have said, you chose that? But whatever. The point is, with the main three and these two, the show gave them a central motivation and had them act accordingly, and actually explored them in depth. So let's talk about the absolute wasted potential the entire roster of side characters had. Let's start with the high school gang, because honestly, the whole high school bit was just not done well at all, and the characters were a huge part in why. Revolves was horrible. He's supposed to be like best friends with Lelouch, and they literally do nothing together. He was just an annoying gag character that honestly did not have a place in the show. Millie was also just a nothing burger. She just doesn't do anything. Her as a reporter could have been something interesting if they bothered to show it, but I understand why they didn't, because it just wasn't worth our attention. Shirley was really the only one in this group that sort of did what this whole high school thing was supposed to do. Have a contrast between the chaotic life of Zero and the attempted normalcy of Lelouch, and what Lelouch was missing because of his pursuits, the cost of what he does, for the classic superhero double life. But do you know why people love both Superman and Clark Kent? Because the people we see around Clark Kent are also really good. Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Ma and Pa Kent, they're all interesting and important characters that are really important to Clark. That cannot be said for Lelouch's high school group except for Shirley, kind of. My issue with Shirley was that she literally does not do anything that does not involve Lelouch. Her entire character revolved around Lelouch. Someone like Lois Lane is at her worst when her entire character revolves around Superman. What makes characters like Lois Lane interesting is that despite being so close to people with otherworldly abilities, they're able to make their own change in their own way. I never really felt that way about Shirley. Now granted, Shirley played a far less significant role in Code Geass than Lois Lane does in Superman stories, so I don't think her character was necessarily bad, but wasted potential. I feel like there should have been more. That's the whole high school group for me. It was an interesting idea. It showed a divide in Lelouch's life that he was missing out on some of life's joys by doing what he does, missing out on connection. And some moments with Shirley and the others showed this concept. That fireworks scene was what it should have been the whole time.
I'll launch fireworks with you again someday. We will. We'll do it together right here. I promise.
But instead, we had a bunch of odd comic relief moments that just didn't match the show. And that brings us to the next group of characters that were completely wasted, and that's everyone in the main conflict. Let's start with Colin, because I get so pissed off when I think back about her character. Because remember, Code Geass is compared to the greatest of greatest stories, and the greatest of greatest stories have amazing characters no matter where you look. Colin is just not up there. She should have been though, and she so easily could have been. She's introduced to us as one of the original freedom fighters for Japan, Even before Lelouch got Geass, she was a spearhead of the rebellion. That's grounds for a badass character, and she is, but she just gets lost in the sea of other mediocre characters as the story goes on, because she was just reduced to fan service girl who has a cool robot. She just feels so unimportant as the story goes on. Why did they give her nothing to do other than hop in the cool robot and fight? Why did they just completely forget about her motivations? She had a really good episode exploring the trauma with her mother as she fell down a hole of drugs and depression. How she hates her mother for abandoning her, but also can't help but still love her and feel bad. This was such a good episode as it focused on the drug itself and the further distribution of it. Wow, a great episode exploring her conflicts and trauma and giving her something to do? Surely expand on this idea more, right?
Snap out of it, Lelouch.
You know what? That was a pretty well done and an appropriate response that does expand on her character. Good job, guys. Now I think there should be more of this, but at least there is something, a start. Now surely we don't do anything stupid, like I don't know, having her still romantically like Lelouch at the end of the story when it really wouldn't make any sense at all and be completely unnecessary, right? Because it also heavily waters down her character and wastes it just to be another love interest. Oh, fuck off. Actually, fuck off. Why? Someone please tell me why. Listen, I get that Code Geass is an older show and it wants to have a harem or whatever, but I don't give a fuck because that's so stupid. Why would Colin, after everything that happened, why would she still like him? That's just a horrible decision for her character. She should have been more distant from Lelouch as the show went on. Her biggest internal conflict was after she found out who Zero was. That she didn't know who she was following this whole time, who the man really is. That was a world-shattering moment that someone she thought she knew so well was the one who's leading into battle all this time. And I feel like everything went back to normal a little too easily. Colin was first and foremost a freedom fighter, not a Black Knight. She should have had more allegiance with her original allies and someone who lied over and over to her. I get her and Lelouch were close, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And yes, Lelouch was able to gain more attraction than anyone, and she correctly admired Zero for that. But why does that lead to romantic attraction? Why couldn't they, I don't know, have her be inspired by Zero like she was, but realize that he was very, very flawed, and try to become a better leader herself for the future? Clearly, they didn't want to have Ogi do anything like that, so why not her? Think about it, the character of her role in this story is comparable to, let's say, Jean in Attack on Titan. Jean had an amazing arc, start to finish, becoming a selfless leader, and had so much fun dynamics with other characters. Compare that to Colin, and it should make you so disappointed. Not having an arc for her, really at all, to just make her another fanservice harem girl for Lelouch is the worst decision I've ever seen from a show of this stature. And why the fuck does this show have this much fan service and want to be a harem show in the first place? It's a show about war crimes, atrocities, revolution, horrific treatment of people, and so on. Having this much fan service and wanting to go in that direction makes the tone so inconsistent. It makes me so upset. But anyway, let's go to Ogi now. And his character itself, it isn't awful. He fit his role pretty well, and I like how he was pretty mistrusting of Zero and skeptical. But my main gripe with his character is how they handled that storyline with Valletta, because again, that plotline had so much potential. The idea of a Britannian who was told from birth and believed that anyone and everyone from Area 11 was horrible and not even human, having amnesia, and falling for a Japanese freedom fighter is a really intriguing idea. And vice versa for Ogi. Their little moments were honestly really cute and I rooted for them, but there were just so little of them in my opinion. When Valletta got her memories back, she basically instantly went back to how she was before. And do you expect me to care about their relationship after that? After she just goes back to being a Britannian official person. They barely gave us anything of Ogi and Valletta in season 2. They end up married, which I'm not against, but you have to give us more than what they gave us. Like, it's an interesting idea that just got wasted. Maybe have Valletta not instantly turn back to who she was, or have her show more hesitation at least, just an ounce maybe? Or just have a good chunk or maybe a whole episode dedicated to Ogi and Valletta in season 2. Because what we end up getting was like one conversation. I don't mind them getting together, in fact I like it, but there was just not enough payoff. This could have been like this show's Ymir and Historia, with a happy ending. A pair that helped each other discover who they should be. Just wasted potential, man. Speaking of wasted romances, the pair of Todo and Shiba had one, and they literally gave us nothing. I'm not joking, literally nothing. They just showed that Chiba had a crush on him, and these characters don't do anything other than fight in the robots, so how am I supposed to care about them? I literally had to look up Chiba's name because I forgot. That's how unimportant she was, and they tried to have a romance for no reason. Either make us care, or don't bother. And now we get to the Britannian people, and my problem is I have no idea what direction they wanted to take for some of them. Some of them are just classic villains, I have no problem with that. Like Schneisel. I liked how he's portrayed as this final boss of strategy that even Lelouch had trouble with. But then there's some like Cornelia, and I truly have no idea what they're trying to do with her. At first, she was just another villain. Pretty one-dimensional, but I thought she was fine in the early days. And I thought she was killed off at the end of season 1, which seemed pretty appropriate and it all seemed good. But then for whatever reason, she lived. Generally, what did she do in season 2 that was ever so important that she had to be alive? And how the fuck is she alive? How? She was like dead. And this happened twice. Just kill her off, man. She doesn't have anything else to do. What they're trying to do is first appeal to the Gooners, and second, I think they're trying to have some sort of redemption arc, because Cornelia ends up surviving the story and lives on, and we see her with Guilford, and with how the story portrays it, it's like a nice and happy moment. But I don't know if they forgot, but she was kind of a whole villain that murdered countless innocent people before. So to do a redemption arc, you kind of have to do more than just have her not like Schneisel and Geass. She has to, you know, actually redeem herself. And they didn't just try it with her, they tried it with Nina too, which isn't a wrong decision, but they just didn't really do much because Nina invented a nuclear bomb on steroids based on pure hatred and racism. It's kind of hard to redeem a character after that. I'm gonna use some examples from other shows about how to do this type of redemption. Attack on Titan obviously had it with the Marley Warriors by introducing their backstory as abused children thrust into a war with the hope of helping their families. They didn't want to kill anyone, but they didn't really have a choice. And after we learned that, we empathize with them because we now understand what they went through and realize it was an incredibly complex and traumatic experience. In 86, Annette helped invent the parades that were built through the torture and murder of the 86, but she felt immense guilt and sorrow for that involvement and viewed herself and everything else as hopeless because of it. She felt as if she was powerless to do anything about it then, and she's still powerless now. But because of Lena's courage, she saw that there was something she could do to help, and she changed her outlook, seeing her friend not submit to that status quo. The commonality between these two are a sense of remorse and guilt, and an aspect of forcedness that causes us to be sympathetic to these characters. Also, these characters change over the course of their stories. There has to be some semblance of all of that to do a redemption. Could you in good conscience say that occurred with Cornelia or Nina? I really couldn't. Nina, maybe you could argue, but I can't really for Cornelia. And I'm not saying these characters are completely bad, it's just that a redemption or turnaround just didn't seem fitting. There was definitely a world where it could have happened though. There were foundations to build upon for these characters to be redeemed. Cornelia's dedication to her family could have led her to see how many families are torn apart because of her actions. Nina's fangirling over Yuffie could have led her to see how many people's heroes died because of everything. But there was just not enough emphasis on this at all. That's why I feel the direction was so weird. The story would have had to approach these characters in a completely different way than how they did it. And with how they did do it, if they wanted a semblance of redemption, they just needed to kill them off with them knowing what they did was wrong. But this is another reason why Ogi and Valletta piss me off so much. For Valletta, a redemption could have been the moment where she realized all that she had learned about the Japanese people were wrong. She could have had a similar moment to Gabby's when she realized that the people Paradis weren't devils, and she could have, I don't know, joined the Dark Knights because of that, and that would bring a whole new pack of dynamics. Holy shit, that could have been really good, but nope. We needed her to be the head of the school for totally important parts of the plot. But let's be a bit positive now. The scientist people were fun to watch, I think they were good. Charles was a perfect Fire Lord Ozai type villain as this looming overtly evil threat. The knights around were cool, I guess. A little bland, but they didn't have to be much at all. Orange guy was fine. He probably should have stayed dead, but you know, he was fine. But of course, what is really good about Code Geass is the plot. The development of the Black Knights all the way to the end is an amazing ride. When I watched this show, I was like, holy shit after every episode. Season 1, through and through, I think was pretty perfect. Yes, I have my complaints about the characters, but I want to make it clear, I don't think they were really horrible, awful characters. They just could have been more in my opinion, and that's why I get so upset, because they're wasted potential. but they were good enough to not ruin the show by any means. There was just so much intrigue early on when no one knew who Zero was, when Lancelot was a threat and seeing the upgrades that Black Knights got for the first time, seeing beautiful character moments from Lelouch in C2, really understanding why C2 sticks with Lelouch through thick and thin, why he's gonna be different from someone like Mao. Lelouch and C2 are honestly among the best pairs from anything ever. I love their dynamic and that they both need each other and their duties and lives. They're the only ones that can match each other, and I think that's perfect. And if it isn't obvious, I'm a Lelouch x C2 guy over the other pairs, because frankly the other pairs aren't very good. The crazy and tragic turn of Yuffie's massacre that makes you sick to the stomach, but still on your toes because you want to see what happens next. The final battle of season 1 with so much going on, and again more twists and turns. Lelouch and Suzaku's confrontation at the end and that cliffhanger it ends off on, it's amazing. I have no complaints I can reasonably give. But then I think season 2 overstays its welcome. Now the constant twists and turns feels a little redundant. Now some of the action seems stretched out and predictable. Now those flaws in the characters are more and more exposed. And now it really seems the show doesn't know what it's doing. It's here that high school plot is truly just exposed. It's such a tonal whiplash from the dark themes of the main plot. It really should have been minimized or honestly taken away altogether. And why does C2 lose her memories? It could have been a cool concept I guess, but literally nothing happens due to it. It just felt uncomfortable to see and really weird. But of course, despite all of its flaws, season 2 does have one big thing going for it, and that is its ending. The show's ending is renowned for how amazing and unmatched it is. And well, I'd have to agree. Zero Requiem is an amazing ending that really does have much company up there with it. It's such a perfect conclusion and wraps up the conflicts of the show amazingly. Having Lelouch die and Suzaku be the one to be Zero at the end is so perfect. The perfect way for both of them to answer for what they have done in this show. Lelouch dying after all he's done as a symbol of just violence and evil, and Suzaku finally being the one to be the symbol of change, to be Zero, the thing he hated so much, and to kill someone who he had always viewed as a brother. For Lelouch, it really shows the tragedy of the world and himself. He never did end up seeing more fireworks with his friends. He didn't get to truly enjoy those memories, but he made sure other people could, showing how he really wasn't just a cool manipulative boss man. Just amazing, amazing, and originally this video was going to be just about the ending, because the ending is really good. But I realized I had so much more to talk about than just the ending. A lot more apparently. But there are a few things I have to nitpick even about this ending, and it mainly has to center around the show's biggest plot twist, of not only Charles but Lelouch's mother being in on this Evangelion instrumentality idea, and that it wasn't Charles that killed her but V2, the person who gave Charles Geass. This just didn't work for me for a few reasons. One, it was not treated as big as it should have been in my opinion. This is a gargantuan twist that doesn't really get treated as such. It's sort of brushed off by Lelouch in like a few minutes. And second, I just don't think this twist needed to happen. Just having Charles be the Ozai with this Evangelion thing is fine, but everything else about the scene is pretty perfect. Lelouch rejected it, C2 changing her mind from her original deal as Lelouch truly did understand her true wish was to be loved and not to die. The ending is still among the best ever, and I have no more complaints about this ending really, other than some people being redeemed and living happily after, but honestly I think that's fine. The whole point was to make a united world after all, so it does make sense. It just doesn't make sense for some of the characters to me personally. So yeah, Code Geass, a show that doesn't need much introduction, with amazing plot, mechas, powers, main characters. Those aspects still stand the test of time and can compete with any other show from anything ever. But the many other aspects show their age. And that's okay. It's a legendary masterpiece, but is heavily flawed. In my opinion, it's gotten overshadowed as time has gone on. Attack on Titan is just better in almost every aspect than Code Geass. That's not a diss on Code Geass, that's a compliment to Attack on Titan. 86 is also better in basically every aspect. And again, that's not a diss. It's a compliment to 86. And no, I haven't watched the movies, I don't plan on it. As I said, this show ended pretty perfectly and I don't think there's a need for anything else. But the confirmed Lelouch XC2 ending is something I am all for. Code Geass is a show with such high peaks. The quote about the color of snow, about happiness as glass, those are beautiful and iconic moments from a beautiful and iconic show. But it just has glaring lows for a show of its caliber. Its absolute disregard for its side cast and the inconsistent tone, a weird high school comedy jammed into a story by humanity's worst aspects. It tried to do too much and clearly didn't succeed many times. For a fun sports analogy, Code Geass is like the James Harden Rockets. Those Rockets teams were elite, led by the truly legendary play by James Harden. They were an all-time team that contended for years and years, but they also fell just short every time. Their style of play was just so hit or miss and so polarizing. A team like the Warriors would always beat them. The Rockets should have won a championship, but due to their inability to play any other style than their own, they always fell short. They were amazing with glaring flaws, just like Code Geass. But this show is still among the greats. It's a true definition of a flawed masterpiece.